Morning, mate. How are we?
Woo! I'm lovely, mate. Thank you very much for that warm introduction.
Well, look, I think, speaking of warm introductions, I think we're going to get a little bit warmer this morning because we've got James Bunting, the whiskey ambassador who's been 15 years drinking whiskey. What a job this must be.
Yeah, mate. I think that's going to be the opening question. Where do I apply?
Exactly right. Here's my CV. Mate, I think we're going to be nice and warm. I think he's bringing a bottle in, which will be good. So we'll have a little taste.
Lovely.
What do you want to get out today?
The difference between whiskey and whiskey, how they get Pete into the whiskey, because you know Pete, good guy.
No, it's James we're talking to.
Oh, sorry, mate.
Not Pete.
Already started. Love it. Look, there's quite a few questions I want to know in regards to whiskey, the making side of things mainly, but also what's his take on Australian whiskey, and recently, or not, I say recently, a couple of years ago, Sullivan's Cove won world's best whiskey. I want to know what he thinks about that, and in Japan also coming onto the market and being really strong as well. Me being a whiskey lover as well, so I'm really keen to just have a dram with the bloke.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See you in there.
Ciao, ciao.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Lifestyle Pirates with me, Big J, and him, Adriano.
Good day.
We are joined this morning. It's a bit fresh in the studio, and we're going to warm up this morning with James Bunting, who is the luxury ambassador for Glenfiddich. Good morning.
Good morning. Well said, Glenfiddich. Lovely.
I do my best. My mum's a Scot, so I do pick up a few wee things.
There's a lot of itchies
Yeah, I
out
bet
there.
you do, mate.
There's a lot of Glenfiddiches out there.
Yeah. I mean, is that a faux pas? Have you found that in your time doing whiskey when people mispronounce what they're drinking and what you're drinking?
Oh, I just think that the names of some of the, so especially single malts, because they're named after where they're from, and they can be quite hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
And, you get a lot of like really strange people. Well, not strange people saying strange names for whiskies.
What's the worst one you've heard?
Well, I used to ask at the beginning of tastings what people like in whiskies, so I got an idea of the room and everything else, and I kind of, quite often I can put people on the spot because I come over quite forceful and knowing. And I said to this one guy, well, what whiskey do you like? And he said, I quite like that lot of lovin', Lagan lovin'. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I think you're trying to say Lagavulin.
What about, there's another one called Brooklady or something?
Brooklady, yeah. Well, there's actually a really good 6-second videos on YouTube by Brian Cox, the actor, who just says the name of the whiskey while he's drinking the whiskey. It's actually really good, and it tells you exactly how to say that whiskey.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you seen the one where the guy is talking to Siri and he's like, I want a chip butty and a beetroot piece.
No.
And Siri can't understand him, and he just goes through this. It's absolutely hysterical, and then he just launches his phone and smashes it. I'll send it to you after.
Yeah, I imagine Siri wouldn't be very popular in Scotland.
Neither would beetroot pieces. That sounds a piece for anyone that doesn't know what a piece in Scotland is. The sandwich.
Yeah.
It's what you used to get when you went to school. You got a play piece for playtime. Yeah. And it was always terrible.
So, mate, I mean, you have probably one of the best job titles ever, a luxury ambassador. I mean, you've been drinking whiskey for 40 plus years. Like, how did it start for you?
How did I start drinking whiskey?
Yeah.
Oh, I blame the parents. My mum used to rub whiskey in my gums when I was like 3 months old, just when I was teething and stuff. Yeah. And then my father was really interested in whiskey. So from a young age, rather than me being one of these kids that stole whiskey from the cabinet when the parents were out, my dad took me through whiskey and he let me taste whiskey and he explained it to me. And we used to visit a lot of distilleries in Scotland where he would always get whiskies. Explain them to me. So I was educated from a young age, so I really kind of fell in love with whiskey, and whiskey is my life rather than just a job. It's always been in my life. Can't remember a time when it wasn't.
So why is it so important?
Whiskey in my life. I think that culturally in Scotland, whiskey's different than it is anywhere else in the world. Maybe apart from Ireland, of course, but we still see whiskey as a great kind of cure for things, a remedy. There's the people that get up in the morning and have a whiskey to get them going, and then they have a whiskey in the afternoon before their nana nap, and then they'll have a whiskey at night to get them to sleep. There's those kind of people. But there's the people, when I grew up, whenever I was sick, it was a hot toddy. Lemon, honey, whiskey, hot water, and it varied the ingredients, depends what was in the fridge time, right? And I would drink, my mum would make that for me when I was sick if I was ever off school, and even at that age, I was kind of pushing her elbow up when she's putting the whiskey in. It's like, I mean, to her it looks like flu. To me, it feels like onset Ebola. So I was like, the more whiskey in the hot toddy, the better. So we still see it very much as a medicinal thing, I think, as well as look. The main thing about whiskey that I find, apart from every other spirit in the world, where it's gin or vodka or whatever, is whiskey is just a conversational thing. You sit down with it. You wouldn't sit down with a bottle of vodka the way you sit down with a bottle of whiskey with friends and discuss it. And you probably sit down with one bottle of vodka, but you might sit down with 5 or 6 bottles of whiskey and go through them. It's a journey, I think. And it's that journey that I bought into at an early age. And, I'm trying to try I've got a list of whiskies that I'm trying to try before I pop my clogs. I'm getting there. I did put a massive dent in it last night.
Last night?
Brilliant.
Well, you're looking remarkably well if you put a dent in last night.
I'm a professional.
Yeah, well, are you recruiting? Do you need an EA?
I get asked that all the time. Do you need an assistant? Do you need an assistant? And some of them have been so much better looking than you, and I've not come back. So it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So what did you
cross that off?
Exactly. Okay, we'll cut this. We're finished.
Thanks for having me.
So what did you put a dent in last night? What did you try?
Well, actually, I was doing an event last night for the Art Gallery in New South Wales. It's one of my partners, and we had the opening of Hilma af Klint, which is an amazing painter who passed away many, many years ago. And it was kind of her secret painting. So I did a little whiskey bar there last night for a couple of 100 people where we tried different whiskies. One of them being the new Grand Cru, which we've got in front of us here. We had that last night, which everybody just loves. And we're going to hopefully try a little bit later on.
Absolutely.
It's I know it's in the morning here.
That's
it's,
okay.
It's 10:15.
Yeah.
But my dad used to say the most important breakfast is the most important whiskey of the day. So as long as we live by those rules, we'll be all right.
And we're absolutely fine to do that as well.
Totally.
And so what's still on your list then?
There's lots of stuff. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but the list just grows because new stuff's coming out.
Yeah.
And especially because I am a Scotch whiskey expert. Although I used to be the ambassador for Jameson.
Right,
I used to be the ambassador for Wild Turkey back in the day and stuff.
Isn't that blasphemy?
And no, not at all. No, I had to put an Irish accent as ambassador for.
Yeah, that's
Jameson.
all.
Jeez, it wasn't easy, I tell you. It took me a long time to get it going, But I love the stuff. Love it deadly, and then I moved to the Scotch whiskey and stuff. And so the list grows because I love whiskey. I love everything about whiskey. I love the culture of whiskey. And we live in a country now in Australia where there's so many new whiskies popping up because we're making them from Australia. And people go, oh, yeah, but it's not Scotch whiskey. No, it's not. It's Australian whiskey. And it's different. You know. And if you look for those different nuances in it, because whiskey is very much about the environment that it's created as well, not just the 3 ingredients to make whiskey or the cask that is finished, and it's really about the environment. And we've got some cracking Australian whiskey, so I'm enjoying looking at them.
So Ken, Scott,
No, go on.
I was going to say, so
go.
on the Scottish whiskey, so can Scotch whiskey only be made in Scotland in the same way that champagne can only be made in France and labelled it that way?
So Scotch whiskey has to come from Scotland. The definition is Scotch whiskey. I believe it was back in the Prohibition days. With Prohibition in America, it was 1919 to 1933, which was Amendment 18, which they passed, which meant you couldn't legally drink whiskey in America. And during the end of that, around about the 32s, I believe it was John F. Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, that realised that they were going to stop Prohibition. I mean, they believed it would go on forever, right? And he went to Ireland and asked for Irish whiskey, but Ireland didn't have any whiskey at that point because, they were fighting for independence from the UK, and every country that was under British rule didn't take their whiskey. So America was the only place who were really selling it at that time. So Joe Kennedy went to Ireland, I believe, and he asked for some whiskey, and they said, we don't have any, we've drank it all, we don't have any, And he went to Scotland, and he got Scotch whiskey. And he actually I believe that he coined the phrase Scotch. He called it Scotch. And he paid radio DJs at the time in the 1930s in America, probably podcasters and that, to every time they mentioned Scotch, they would get paid for it. And Scotch became popular, and he brought Scotch into America, because the rougher illegal whiskies in America weren't that great.
Wow.
Which is where the cocktail thing came out of, right? Because the whiskies were so bad that they had to mix it with something else. And that's where the cocktail culture came out.
All right.
Which is pretty awesome.
So do you like whiskey cocktails? Or do you just prefer?
Have you seen my Instagram? It's 70% heavy on me drinking cocktails. I like to visit venues. I have a good relationship with a lot of people in the hospitality. I've been in hospitality all my life, right? So, but in Australia, I've been in hospitality for 22 years or something. So, I have a lot of good friends and very friendly with a lot of the bars. So I like to go around and support them and try the cocktails that they're making. If there's a new cocktail that comes out, I want to try it with a whiskey and see what it's like, see what that innovation's about, you know. Maybe steal it. No, I'm just kidding, not steal it. But I mean, steal was the wrong, I meant inspiration.
Yeah.
Get some inspiration from it. You know?
I remember years ago my first experience at Baxter's, and I was very green in the whiskey area, and I went up to the bar and said, "Oh, can I get 2 vodka lime sodas?" And the guy was like, "No."
Yeah. Did you bounce on the way out?
No.
No.
and I said, "What do you mean no?" He said, "Well, we're a whiskey bar. We don't serve this." This was years ago when it first opened. And he said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 2 whiskey and apple juices, fresh apple juice." He said, "If you don't like them, that's okay, but try them for me, you know." And I'm quite happy. I'll go on the journey with anyone. They were fabulous.
Yeah, whiskey and
And then we bounced out afterwards. We didn't know because you go up the stairs, you're like, "Oh, it's still daylight."
I meant more, did they throw you out for asking for vodka? That's what I meant. But the whiskey and apple juice is good. And that's the thing, you know, I get this. In fact, I had it last night. This is interesting last night because we had some canopies coming around. We had some whiskey and the woman said to me, "Can you drink whiskey with food?" And I was like, "Yeah, all the time." In Scotland, we would have a whiskey with our food like you would have a wine with your food in France. You know, I mean, that's what I did growing up. I don't know about everybody else, but whiskey and food go together. And you asked me about Sanctuary Cove earlier in the Gold Coast, where we just had the International Boat Show, Sanctuary Cove. I was up there with some of our partners doing some events, and I did a dinner at the Sanctuary Cove Golf and Country Club. It's a private member club. And I worked with the chef to create 6 courses using whiskey as an ingredient in each course in a different way. So it was pretty inventive what he did and how he did it. And then we had the whiskey along with that course. And there's something quite magical about eating whiskey and drinking whiskey, the same whiskey together. So whiskey and food go really well together.
Yeah.
So how do you set up a match, a pairing for a whiskey?
Well, I will work with the chef. We'll sit down. We'll try the whiskies. And interestingly enough, the chef wasn't a whiskey drinker, so he'd never really experienced whiskey before. He wasn't a big whiskey drinker, so this was new for him. So it was quite exciting, you know, to do this. And we sat down, we drank the whiskies, and we worked out what the flavors were and the characteristics were, and how we could use those to influence other dishes. So it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, really, really good. I mean, for instance, the first course was a kangaroo tartare and a beef consomme, and Glenfiddich 15-year-old was in the beef consomme, and it's probably one of the best soups I've ever had in my life.
I actually salivated into the microphone then.
Did you? I noticed that.
I can feel it.
Yeah, I was salivating as well. You know.
Did you get to try as well? Did you get? So you
I hosted the dinner, so
Yeah, so
So
you got-
it was
yeah,
only
cool.
it was only 12 people. It was
Okay.
12 of handpicked from the president of the club to
Yeah.
do the dinner. So so I mean, I worked with them and we created that. So it was interesting because on the night was the first time I've tasted what we've been creating for a couple of months.
Yeah, cool.
Back and forward, whether it's been on Zoom or on the phone. So that's exciting for me because I think, well, how is this going to turn out? And I sit down and try, and it was absolutely fantastic. So whiskey and food's a big thing, right? I used to say back in the day, I'd say, whiskey was invented just to take the taste of haggis away.
That's not true, is it?
No. But when we do serve haggis, I do a lot of Scottish evenings. So I do the Ode to the Haggis and I present the haggis. You know Robbie Burns' poem, The Ode to the Haggis?
Yeah.
You know that one? Fair fire on his sonsy face, great chieftain of the puddin' race, aboon the ma ye tak your place, pinch, stripe or lerm. You know that stuff? All very traditional in Twee with kilts on. I can translate that into Australian later for you.
Thanks, mate. We're going to have subtitles on this video.
Yeah, we're probably going to need them. Most of my videos have subtitles. I completely forgot what I was talking about there.
With the haggis, you're presenting the haggis.
Best thing for haggis is I always serve a little jug of gravy with it. And by gravy, I mean straight from the bottle. Right? And we pour a little bit of whiskey over the top of haggis because there's nothing better than that, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe for people that don't know what haggis is, What is haggis?
Haggis is we get the best butchers in Scotland travel the country and they find the best sheep that they can and they bring them in, and they basically take the best bits of that sheep and chuck it away and just use what's left and stuff, and then boil it, and it's just delicious. Some pepper, and they put pepper in it, and barley and a few other things in there, and it's just one of the most delicious things ever.
So speaking of ingredients, what's whiskey made of? Like, how do you make it?
Interesting. Well, and I ask this a lot. I mean, I do ask this a lot when we're doing when I'm doing tastings or events or something. Anyone know how many ingredients are in whiskey? And you'll be lucky if you get 2 people maybe put their hands up, or if there's a bit of a nerd there.
How many?
I don't know.
3.
Correct. If there's a bit of a nerd there, shout out all 3 right away. Water, sugar, yeast. Because they're so excited about it. And I go, all right, it's okay, calm down, man.
No more for him.
Exactly.
What was it again? Water, sugar, and yeast.
It's grain,
all
isn't it?
alcohol's 3 things: water, sugar, yeast. So if you're making wine, you're going to get the sugar from the grapes. If you're making, I'm going to test you here. Here we go. If you're making cider, you get it from
The apples or the pears.
The pears. Do you like that?
Yeah, it's fancy, man.
Yeah, that is a fancy. Pear cider, that's above my pay grade. Man. I don't think I can ever get up to pear cider. But I think so. And then if you're making if you're using sweet corn, what do you get?
Right, no. Sweet corn to make a whiskey. It's a whiskey still. You can make it from any grain.
It's just bourbon, pretty much. In fact, the mash bill as ingredients has to be like no less than 51% sweet corn to be a bourbon, no less than 51% rye to be a rye. But then they will put other stuff in there like barley or malted barley to help it kickstart it along. In fact, you've heard of Jack Daniels, sour mash, right? So sour mash is where they take a bit from the last mash bill and put it into the new mash bill because it's already activated and kickstarts that.
But they're all whiskies, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all whiskies. It's just they're different from where they come from. So Scotch whiskey is only from Scotland, Irish whiskey is only from Ireland, and bourbon is it can be from all of America. But you were mentioning with champagne before. Kentucky bourbon can only come from Kentucky.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So there's legislation around it, but it's all 3 things. But it's more than 3 things because it's about the 3 ingredients, but it's also about how you're drying the barley after you washed it. It's the flavour of the barley, it's the flavour of the water, what the pH level is. It's also all about the wood. The most important thing about whiskey is wood. 75% of the flavour of whiskey comes from the wood.
Yeah.
So that's a lot.
Okay. Because I was going to ask, how do you get such a diverse flavour palette from 3 ingredients?
Then you've also got the environment. So, if you look at whiskies from the west coast of Scotland, they've got that kind of salty, briny, iodine kind of note, which comes from the casks being near the sea and sucking in a bit of that sea and sea moisture. It's going to change it. Yeah, Islay. Well said. I had a guy last night who was telling me all about Islay. And I said Islay. And he went, yeah, Islay. Isley's Islay. Yeah, Islay. And I said, so have you been to the island of Islay? And he went, it's the island of, Islay. And I went, there you go. He's got it. Yeah, you got it. And it only took 20 minutes. Yeah. But it's so you're going to get that kind of, then the Highlands of Scotland, where we're or Speyside, where our whiskey's from, it's kind of that light, floral, really easygoing kind of whiskey. It can be quite raisiny for ours because we use a lot of sherry cask as well. We finish a lot of whiskies in sherry.
How do you get such peat in a flavour profile? Is peat introduced?
So what do you know? So peat is basically if you dig down a couple of meters from the topsoil, you're going to start to hit peat, which is basically just like a muddy coal, right? It's we dig it up, we dry it out, we burn it in our fires. The further to the core, the core of the earth it goes, the more crystalline and compact it becomes because of the gravity and pressure, and after I think it's 15,000 years, that peat will become coal because it will start to crystalline, and then the further down you start getting different minerals from that to the Earth's crust until you eventually get 50 million years and you get diamonds. Right? We're Scottish, we're too cheap to use Dig down 3 meters. But it's all the vegetation that's been broken down, which is really interesting because we were talking about Islay there, and we've been talking about Australian whiskey. So peat is the vegetation that's been broken down. So in Islay, because it's an island and it's been, and a lot of its life has been submerged in water, there's a lot of sea minerals in that, dead fish and such like, and that gives that peat a bit of a crab shelly smell when it's burnt, and the perfume of the smoke has that kind of crab shelly thing. And then you go to the Highlands, and the peat from the Highlands is completely different because there's none of that sea, right? It's in the middle of the Highlands. So it's all like kind of lovely flowers and nice trees and the dead bunny rabbits, and depending on where you're in the Highlands, maybe a bit of an Englishman or something, because a couple of Scots.
Yeah, you don't see that description on the bottle anyway, do you? Dead Englishman, bunny rabbits.
No, you don't really have that. But the interesting thing which I'm enjoying, which I was talking about in my journey, is trying Australian peated whiskies, because quite often there's a bit of eucalypt at the back.
Oh, really?
Because that's native to Australia, and if they're using peat from Australia, there's a bit of eucalypt, and it's really quite interesting and nice.
What's a good Australian peated whiskey?
There's a few of them.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll get a list.
One doesn't come to mind right now, but there is a few. There's a pretty few good ones out there.
So, how did they figure out to put that in the whiskey?
Oh, they don't put it in the whiskey. What we do is we basically, when we bring the barley in from the field, when a little barley's in the field, right, and it's got the wee plant, right, the barley will drop off into the soil, and then the rain will come and it'll swell up, and then it'll dry out a little bit when the sun comes out. Scotland is like 4 seasons, 7 seasons in one day. You know what I mean? We quite often say in Scotland, if you don't like the weather, just hang about for 15 minutes. It'll change. So basically, what that does is when it gets wet and then it dries and it gets wet, it actually changes the sugars in the barley into the starches in the barley into sugars, which is what we want to make whiskey. We need that. So we artificially do that. We take our barley in and we steep it for like 4 hours, then take the water off, then steep it for another 4 hours. And I think we do that for about 12 hours. Then we lay it out on a massive like warehouse floor, which is a molten floor. And we just leave it for a few days. And it starts to dry, and it also starts to turn the starches into sugars. And after a few days, you'll start getting little roots from the barley. And then we have men, especially at Balvenie, because we still do a lot of our rare crafts. We have maltmen who go along with the shields, the wooden shields still, and then lift it up and throw it so it separates all the little roots so they don't stick together and it doesn't get moldy. Then once we get it down to a certain moisture content, we'll take it and we'll put it into a kiln, and we'll light fires of peat underneath it. And we're not a particularly smoky whiskey, so we just use a little bit of peat in the morning, and then we turn our attention to anthracite, which is a smokeless fuel, which we use in the distilleries. And that peat smoke rises up through a perforated floor that dries the barley. Once the barley's dry, we can keep it for as long as we want until we're ready to make whiskey. It's great. It's like Scottish popcorn. That's what we call it. If you ever get up to a pagoda where it is, grab a few bits. It's the best tasting thing ever.
Yeah.
And then we take that and we grind it in a coarse flour and we steep it in water, and that becomes a sugary. All the sugar comes out the grains into the water, and then we then take that and we add some yeast to it, and it ferments, and we get CO2, and a byproduct of CO2 is the alcohol that we get through a still. So all the way through that, including the fact that we're using copper stills, the copper stills affect the alcohol because interaction between the alcohol and the copper, which can create flavors in whiskey, kind of false flavors. You get a lot of stone fruit flavors coming from that, and it's really exciting because you never know what you're going to get, because making whiskey isn't an exact science. It's just all about, people say, oh, can you speed it up? No, because aging whiskey in wood is what it's about. That's where the flavors come from. That's why it's so different. That's why there's no two whiskies that taste the same if they come from different casks, because every cask is different.
Yeah. So with the age, with the age number on the bottle, what does that refer to then? Because with wine, it's when the fruit's picked, from memory. What does it refer to?
Whiskey is the minimum age of the whiskey in the bottle.
Right.
There's nothing younger. We've got this Grand Cru here, which is a new whiskey that's just kind of arrived in Australia, which is finished in French cuvée casks, and it's 23 years old, which means there's not a drop in this whiskey that's younger than 23 years old.
The way I like it.
Well, legally, it has to be over 3 years old, right? So if you ever see a bottle of whiskey with no age statement in it, the only guarantee you can get it is it's older than 3 years old because it's a legal limit, right? But
is that in Scotland or worldwide?
Well, it'll be worldwide. Okay. If you put in that age statement, it has to be the minimum on the bottle. But quite often, there's far older whiskies in there. If it's a blended whiskey, sorry to bring that up, but if it's a blended whiskey, then there's going to be different ages in there. But quite often with single malts, if you've maybe got a 15-year-old whiskey, there could possibly be 16, 17, 18-year-old whiskey in there because it's consistency of flavour. And in Scotland, we have something wonderful. Like American can only use their casks once, but in Scotland, we can use our casks a few times. So when we're creating a new single malt, we can use different amounts of different whiskies from different casks, some from the first fill, second fill, third fill, full fill, and that becomes your recipe. Create that, and they'll change all the time. And sometimes we just need to put older whiskies in there, but never younger.
Is older whiskey always better?
Well, it depends. Whiskey is so personal, I mean, and the blended whiskey was created to be kind of have mass appeal. There's a little bit of something from all around Scotland in a blended whiskey, so someone's going to identify with that. Whereas single malt is very singular. It's very personal. And I'll like single malts that you probably won't like, and I think that's the joy of it, and that's part of the journey is discovering what you do like. So, what was the question again?
No idea what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But I want to know about blended whiskies.
I was just saying, is older always better?
Oh, so,
and you just say it was subjective. So in the same way, I guess, with wine and stuff.
Yeah. Well, so look, the thing with whiskey is it's getting rarer, right? So imagine that we first fill a barrel full of 1,000 bottles. You're losing 2% a year of the angel share, which is the alcohol and the young alcohols. The higher the alcohol, the thinner it is, the easier it is to escape the pores. So a lot of those younger alcohols leave the cask quite quickly, right? And they're gone, right? A lot of them are quite sort of sulfury and eggy. So the benefit of charring the inside of a barrel is you have charcoal inside the barrel, which means that those eggy notes can't come back into the charcoal. It's a filter. It's charcoal's a natural filler. It's not going to let bad stuff into the cask. It's only going to let it out. So when you're breathing, 2% a year. So by the time we get to 12-year whiskey, you've only got 750 bottles left in that 1,000, see. You've lost 25% of the cask. So your price has just suddenly gone up, right? Yeah. Time you get to 25 years, you've only got half the cask left. By the time you've got to 50 years, you maybe only got like 100 bottles left. And that's why 50-year-old Glenfiddich is around about $76,000 a bottle.
Did you bring one?
I did, actually. No. Yeah. It's like, do you have your Visa card? Yeah.
He can bring whatever you want.
So how much would you serve that by a dram?
$5 off today, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. That's awesome. Would you ever open that up and sell it by a dram, or do you have to? You would only sell the whole bottle?
There's many luxury venues and that have a 50-year-old and they will sell it by the dram. Yeah, I mean, why not? Definitely.
What does that taste like? A 50-year-old whiskey?
Oh. Well, actually, there was, I recall a couple of years ago, there was two Balvenis that came out. They'd been sitting side by side for 50 years, best mates in the part of the warehouse, just sitting there, And there was only, I think by memory, there was 98 bottles in one and there was 89 in the other. And they'd been filled on the same day, at the same time, in these two casks. And they were so stunningly different. One was just quite light in colour and it was really fresh, and the other one was a bit darker and it was raisin, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. So you never know what's going to happen. That way. They were really beautiful whiskies.
Single malt. Why is it called single malt?
Because it's one from one single distillery. And that process I explained earlier about the barley and malting that barley, that's malting. So single malt distillery. It's from one place. Okay. So single malts are always named after where they're from. Right? Yeah. So Glenfiddich is a real place. Balvenie a real place. Ailsa Bay is a real place. Lagavulin, Lefroy, Ardbeg are all real places. But people have
Bundanundineen or whatever that is. It's a whiskey at the moment. It's like Bundanundineen, or I'm butchering this, but yeah.
It's I'm actually trying to. There's like 4 whiskies you've got in that one singer. I think you're trying to say Bunnahabhain.
Maybe.
Wouldn't happen.
Sure.
Wouldn't happen, yes. Well, so that's a real place. So people have jobs and dogs and credit card debt like the rest of us, you know, they live in these places. And that's single malt. But blended whiskey is named after the people that blended them. So in the, you know, when the grocery stores of old days in the later part of the 1700s, early part of the 1800s, basically they bought a cask of whiskey from somebody who's making it, and they sold it in their shop. People would come in, you know, you didn't just, it wasn't like nipping next door to the bottle shop. You had to probably travel the best part of a day by horseback to get there, and you would take your own ceramic, there was no bottles. So you'd take your own ceramic jug, you know, usually with your name or your crest on it, and you'd walk in and you'd fill it full of whiskey, and you pay your money, and you go home and you drink it, and you go, this is terrible. You know, this is Bula Muna, whatever you said it was. And it just doesn't
Fluent.
And it just doesn't really taste that great. And so what the grocery owners decided was that, and these grocery store owners were people like John and James Shivers in Aberdeen, and Johnny Walker in Kilmarnock, and you know, William Teachers, Arthur Bells, you know, so blended whiskey's named after the people that blended it. Single malt's named after where it's from, which is a really easy way to remember it, right? You know?
Great way.
And they decided that, well, we've got, I think they were downstairs in the cellar, and they said, look, we've got like 10 casks of whiskey, and they're all different, you know. And they said, well, why don't we just get an empty cask? Take a little bit from each of the 10 casks, blend it in the empty cask, and then we've got 10 casks of the same whiskey, and when we've got a flavour we like, then we'll just sell that. And they did, and consistency was key. People would always go back to their grocery stores for their whiskey because it was, and William Grant's, who I worked for, was the same. He brought out Grant's whiskey, you know, so yeah.
Blended whiskies, are they good ones? There has to be.
Oh, there's no such thing as bad whiskey. There's only good whiskey and better, right? Like seriously, let's get
I like that.
Let's get that. There's no such thing as a bad whiskey. And that's a good thing about it, I think, you know. There's a lot of whiskies that might not be for your personal taste. I'm saying your personal taste because I like them all, right? I think there might not be whiskies that are from your personal taste, but your worst whiskey is somebody else's favourite whiskey. And that's a good thing about it, you know. And if you mention them, if anyone ever says to you, like, you know, oh, I like Glenfiddich, they go, no, I don't like Glenfiddich. They'll defend it, you know, they'll defend their whiskey. They're very brand loyal in the whiskey world as well. You know, people have a real love for it because it means a great deal to them.
Has your palate, I don't want to say matured, but has it changed over the years? So, you know, with wines, you know, some people, they'll start off by drinking a certain wine, and then, you know, years and years later, they've changed their tastes and they no longer will drink that wine. I'm at the stage of my whiskey journey. I like a lot of the Portwoods, the sherry casks, the slightly sweeter stuff, and I'm not quite yet into the peaty, darky, oily, smoky stuff. Will that kind of change?
I think so, but
or is it just you just got to keep trying
it? Like, for instance, I've represented for the better part of 20 years whiskies from Speyside in Scotland.
Yeah.
You know, I used to be an ambassador of Chivas Regal, Glenlivet, and many other whiskies. And my escape after drinking whiskey for work is to drink whiskey for pleasure. And I quite go towards that smoky side because it's different.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like I'm working. Do you know what I mean? It's like a lot of chefs don't want to go out and eat in a restaurant, you know, like, because it's like working in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place for me because I have a difference between them, and I can explore. My journey of exploring when I'm not working is still exciting for me, you know, because I'm not drinking the whiskies that I'm used to.
And are you a neat or a rocks man?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And we're going to have a little whiskey, and we're going to look at it, and we're going to cut it with a little bit of water, and I'm going to talk about that. And what we're going to do is, well, it's interesting. I was talking about this last night. Yeah, I was talking about this last night. So am I talking too much? I do talk a lot, right? So yeah.
It's easier. People want to hear you, not me.
Right, let me show you this. Hang on. Let me do the whole thing here. Okay. Right. So this is Glenfiddich Grand Cru. Because the box is cool, man. This is what it's about. I mean, look at this. So this is Glenfiddich Grand Cru.
Ooh.
Which is 23 years old. But before we get to that, you're asking about ice. I think you should drink whiskey however you want to drink whiskey. Now, seriously, I mean, I grew up with a lot of men, and I worked in the hospitality industry, you know, since I've been like 14 or something. I used to collect glasses, you know, my mum cleaned the pub, and I used to collect glasses. I ended up being the licensee of that pub eventually. But I used to get a lot of guys come and drink whiskey and milk.
What?
So,
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it was a big thing. It was a big thing in the kind of 80s and 90s because, and after the war, actually, because a lot of men who had gone through the Second World War had been malnourished a lot, and they had a lot of ulcers in their stomach and things that were incurable. So by drinking milk would coat their stomach, and they'd be able to drink whiskey with it without it being painful. So I used to get guys that come in the pub and would drink it with like low-fat milk, and one would have full cream milk. One would be hot, and one would be cold, and and they were all like, it was like kind of, they were all like Dad's Army. Do you know what I mean? So like you'd mix them up intentionally, and they just start going at each other. It's great. It's good fun. I used to love it.
Is that where
Great sense of entertainment?
I bet.
Is that where that old wives' tale comes about drinking milk before you go out on a big night? Because it's an alkaline and it lines
it's
your
an
stomach.
alkaline that lines your stomach, like
is that
milk
where that
of
comes from?
magnesia and all that sort of stuff. It coats
right.
your stomach, and it's a consistency. I think it's like these things you take when you've got acid reflux or something. It's the same kind of thing. It's that kind of milky substance that helps to coat the inside your stomach. So I've never been a fan of whiskey and milk, for instance. But,
I just want to try it now to try it.
Do
really.
not mix milk with this stuff.
No, not at all. I mean,
James will storm out.
We are going to add a little bit of water to it, and I'll explain about that, because what we're going to try and do is, people ask me all the time, about water and about ice and everything, and we're going to add like 2 drops of water to this whiskey today. 2 drops, 2 tiny little drops, and what we're trying to emulate is that if you walk through a garden and it's absolutely pissing it rain, right? Imagine that as a lot of water. If you walk through a garden and it's snowing heavily, imagine that as ice, right? But if you walk through a garden just after it's rained, you get all the aromas of all the flowers and everything else. You don't get that with other two. So we're trying to emulate that by adding just a little bit of water just to open it up as well. And a lot of the flavours in the whiskey are held in by the alcohol. Like they're trapped in there. But they're soluble in water, so a couple of drops of water just releases the oil, and we'll see the oil release from the whiskey today. It just releases the oil, and it just opens it up. And ironically, the aroma and the flavour of alcohol is trapped in the alcohol itself. So sometimes by adding 2 drops of water to whiskey, it can become stronger and appear bigger, more alcoholic. But it's not. It's just because you're actually releasing those flavours.
Wow.
It's got me really excited.
Has it?
It does.
Yeah. So this is it. This is Grand Cru. Let me get this out of here. This is it.
And so what does Grand Cru, James, mean in a whiskey world? Is it the same as the wine world?
Well, this is the thing. This is 23-year-old Grand Cru. So this has been. We have a wonderful contact in France who Grand Cru is, or Cuvée, is the wine that's taking out of the barrel, then put into a bottle to become a certain sparkling wine. It's not mention that name because it isn't that, because it's just created to become that sparkling wine. But the casks, when they're disgorged or emptied to fill those bottles, are then sent to Scotland. And we put 23-year-old Glenfiddich in there for a period of time. And what it does is it's quite remarkable what we know about wood now. These Grand Cru casks are almost do to the whiskey what sandpaper does to wood. It just kind of rounds off and it smooths it, and it makes it something quite exceptional. And I brought this today because I've been drinking whiskey all my life, right? It's not, this isn't a job for me. This is my life. It's my passion, you know? And this is the best whiskey I've ever had.
Really?
And that's a tall order, right? When you open this here.
For those of you that are watching, watch Adriano's lips. He just doesn't know what to do with himself.
all right.
Doesn't know what to do
I know,
with
you're
himself.
going to be okay with this, man. Do we have to, should we call an Uber now? Or what?
100% the keys are staying here. That's it.
Yeah. So look,
Phone's off anyway, mate, so we're good to go.
Normally, now if this doesn't happen, forget it. But normally these bottles, they just sing when you open them. They've got just a great cock porp.
Yeah, that would. Yeah. Subtitles.
We've not even done anything yet.
No, that's Scottish for popcork. I can't. Still getting it right. It's
Popped cork.
Are we ready? Let's try and. Oh, hello! The whiskey has arrived.
You're playing my song.
Now, doesn't that sound happy? Oh, look, I'm dropping stuff everywhere.
What's your headphones?
I've got them all good. I've done this. This is not my first rodeo. Right, so I've got this lovely pourer here just to make it nice and easy for us, right?
Where'd you get that from?
Oh, I can't remember.
It's on his keyring.
I know, it's like it.
I got where did I get it from just now? Or where did I buy it from?
Oh, where'd you pull it out from?
Oh, I have a secret pocket for it. You know, I've got a pocket built in my trousers.
like Geordie girls.
So this is just absolutely so. Shall we pour some of that? I'll just pour it from mine first, just in case the pourer had anything in it. You don't want anything in your whiskey, apart from more whiskey. Apparently. So.
Thank you.
Look at him, he's got his hand in it. Give it to me. So let me talk you through this. So 23 years old, so nothing in here younger than 23, as we discussed, right? The thing about whiskey, we look at whiskey a couple of different ways when we're doing a tasting, right? The first thing we do is we have a little look at the colour of the whiskey. You can see this is beautiful. It's so light in colour. It's not far off a white wine colour, really. You know, it is really light.
It's like
really
an aged Chardonnay almost.
Yeah, it kind of actually, it's funny you say that because have a little nose of it. There's a bit of a winey note there. You know, you get that wine from the cask because as the whiskey, as we put this it's not white spirit, it's 23-year-old, as we put into the cask that the wine's been in, as the winters and summers come and go, the barrels take on and lose moisture. So when they take on moisture, they expand, which sucks the whiskey into the wood. And when they lose moisture, they contract, which brings all of that flavour back in the whiskey. So it's this living, breathing thing that we're getting. So the wine that was in this cask has now came into the whiskey a little bit, and it's helping to flavour and it's helping to do a few other things that add certain notes in the nose. So I get that little bit of a winey note in it. Now, when we smell whiskey, a lot of people do this quite wrong, but we can actually taste the whiskey before we taste the whiskey. So we need a good idea what it's like. Now, the way that we do that is we pick up the glass, put it on your nose, but have your mouth open.
Yeah.
And just breathe in through your nose and just let it out through your mouth. Just let it organically come down the back of your throat and out of your mouth. It's not the first time I've said that. And you'll start to feel it at the back of your throat. Do you feel that? You feel that heat? You feel that little bit of vanilla there.
Lovely.
It's weird, but you actually really get it, right? It's quite pleasurable, right?
Yeah,
we don't have to drink it now because
I
we've
do
done
that
it.
with cognac.
Do you want it back? Should we pour it back in?
Yeah. Let's try and reseal it. It's not going to happen, is it? Really? But so what we're going to do is we're just going to have a tiny little taste, right? Because we're going to have a little sip, and then I'm going to talk you through what's happening. Okay.
Awesome.
So you don't want to, I'm saying, because I know you, man, I don't want you to scull this and I want it, right? It's a little sip, right? And then we're going to look at it and we're going to add a bit of water and we're going to see how that changes and see what complexity comes out of it, right? So have a wee sip of this.
Cheers.
Oh my God. Now, as breakfast whiskey comes, there's not much better.
That's the best breakfast I've ever had.
It's emotional.
But so what you're getting is you get that little nip in the front of your tongue, tiny this one, right? And then it kind of, you feel it coming back, but round about now you feel this heat in your chest here. This is what my dad used to call the money's worth. You know? It's your money's worth of whiskey. How it makes you feel is what it's about, you know? Very much so. Ushkaba, the water of life. Eau de vie in French or aquavit in Latin. It's the water of life. It makes you feel better. It makes you so stronger.
It kind of felt like my cheeks were puffing out a little bit as it almost
Smiling.
warmed everything out. Oh, no, you're bloody smiling. It just warmed everything up.
Doesn't it? And there's this, you're smiling now. There's this, and it does, and it makes you feel good. I mean, soldiers and armies were given alcohol before they went into battle. You know, the British Navy would give them rum. You know, the French would get red wine until the French Empire went so far as to, it was impossible to send that much wine for that many troops. Napoleon got his alchemists to distill the wine into a spirit to send in smaller quantities so they could reconstitute the water at the other end and make it into wine. But, you know, why are you going to drink 6 bottles of wine? You can drink 1 bottle of cognac, right? And then cognac and brandies became the norm because brandy is just distilled wine. So I think it's always been that about how it makes you feel. I mean, English soldiers, when they fought in Holland, drink the local drink called Geneviève, you know, and which the English then brought back to England and shortened it down to gin. But they were given that when they were fighting there, and they would cry, "Where's our Dutch courage? We need some Dutch courage," if they weren't given it. So that's where that kind of saying comes from.
Right.
That's courage.
Is that why a lot of the gin distilleries are doing Navy strength? Is that where that Navy strength, I guess, alcohol comes from as well? It's a bit higher because of the.
But
people
high,
going
and
into
alcohol was great because as we were getting back to that whole thing about me drinking hot toddies,
Yeah.
alcohol was great for things like scurvy.
Yeah.
You know, and stuff like that. I mean, if you look at Angostura bitters, that was alcohol remedy to cure scurvy.
battle. Yeah.
And so
You mean they didn't have lemon lime bitters back then?
They probably did. I think I can just see, something like that, like Captain Cook or something. Going, where's my lemon, lime, and bitters? Exactly. I think no, it wasn't, and the water wasn't good to drink. Back in those days either. I mean, you would drink alcohol, or that's what beer. A lot of beer was drank because the water was so bad. I mean, I still don't really like water. I can drink it, but I have to cut it with whiskey first. If that makes any sense. So let's. So we've got that nice feeling here. Pretty good. We got some little water pipette bottles here, which are pretty cute and good. Now, before you do this, before you get carried away and start chucking water in here, I'm actually going to show you something. So I'm going to hold this glass. You might not see this in the camera, but if you look at this, maybe we'll do one up close to the camera so you can see it. If you look at this, you'll actually see the oil separate from the whiskey when I add the water. Just look at the whiskey and watch this. See that?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Now,
Science.
that oil contains so much more because it's just going to let everything out, right? And I'm going to give it a really good mix around. You've got to give it a good mix. And you can actually see the oil because if you take your glass and you swirl it in there, look at the little lines in your glass.
Yeah.
See the lines?
Yeah.
See how they're running down and they're all pretty. Look at my glass. See the oil, how it's holding on, and it's just, look at that. It's just sitting there. That's the oil that's came out. Now, have a nose of your whiskey. Then have a nose of my whiskey.
Oh, yeah, right.
Have a nose of yours, and have a nose of mine. Don't put your nose right in it, though, because,
COVID.
Yeah.
Oh, very different.
Not that I'm saying you have a big nose. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised you couldn't smell it from here.
That's very different.
Isn't it? Now, so I'm going to try this. Oh, fantastic. So have another little sip straight, then add 2 drops of water and have a look at it as you add the water in there.
Oh, it's bloody good. I don't know if I want it.
I'm quite content already,
2 drops of water?
Yeah, but watch what you do. See if you can see the oil as you do it yourself. Get it in a good bit of light that you can see it.
Oh, that's magic.
You see that? Isn't it amazing, right? You just see the oil, right?
It's very cool.
Right, now give it a good swirl around, mix that, activate that water and whiskey together. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to emulate that. You don't smell anything when it's pissing rain, don't smell anything when there's a lot of ice. You walk through the garden just after it's rained.
Yeah, wow.
That's what we're trying to grab there, right? Now, have a wee taste of this now. Wait till you get this. This is just delicious. It's so much richer and it lasts so much longer on the palate that you can actually pick stuff out. That's the thing about adding water. That's what master distillers and blenders do. Is they add quite a bit of water. David Stewart, who is my mentor and boss, and the malt master of Balvenie, who is now, I think he's been with the company 57 years. He's the longest serving malt master in the history of the world.
Wow.
He's the only man to put whiskey in a cask and take it out 50 years later, I believe.
Wow.
No one's ever lived long enough for being with the same company. And he's done it, and he got an MBE from the Queen a couple of years ago on the 6th of June or whatever for his services to whiskey.
Service to whiskey.
How
Mr.
brilliant.
David Stewart MB, and he's the most loveliest man. He's like my favourite uncle. I love him bits. He's so great. I've spent such wonderful time, and I miss him. I miss everybody at the distillery, both Glenfiddich and Balvenie, so much because I was there a lot, before COVID. So it's they're all family. Right? William Grant's is the last family-owned distillery in the world. Distillers. My boss, right, is great-great-great-granddaughter of William Grant, who built the distillery in 1887. That's cool.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? To do that, have the dedication for a family over the years to do that is pretty cool. Really cool.
So what brought you to Sydney then? Or what brought you down under?
Well, the police were after me. No, I'm just kidding. I was,
The same old song.
yeah, same old. Yeah, but I know a lot of people probably think I came out here in the First Fleet or something. But I worked in hospitality, so I worked in hotels, 5-star hotels around the world as well, and I was working for the Shangri-La hotel chain.
Yep.
It's a hotel in Hong Kong, and I came to Sydney to open the one in Sydney in like just before 2000 or something. I came across, and I did that for a couple of years, and then got back into whiskey again.
Yep.
And started to do that. Whiskey was always my passion. It's what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I got back into whiskey in Australia. I noticed that there wasn't a lot of Scottish men doing whiskey. So I thought, give it a crack, mate.
Oh yeah.
You
Would it
see
be
how we
right?
got?
Would it be? You do a really good Aussie accent, by the way.
Just quickly before, because I want to see if I'm tasting correctly. It feels like it lingers around a lot more. It lingers on the tongue a lot more with having the water.
It does, and it stays. See, the thing with when you're drinking alcohol, whiskey straight, and you drink it straight, it kind of gone. You haven't got that flavour for long because the alcohol burn. Alcohol cleans, right? And this time of COVID, we know that we're rubbing alcohol in our hands every 10 seconds almost, and we're basically, if you're doing your teeth, you're using mouthwash, which contains alcohol, because alcohol cleans really well. So when you've got the alcohol,
My insides must be squeaky clean.
Oh, they must be. I think you're off without a shadow of a doubt. I think, you know what I mean. Although, don't drink hand sanitizer, kids.
That's a disclaimer.
Okay, that's not what he meant. But when you have too much high alcohol in your mouth, it's going to dissipate quite quickly and take a lot of that flavour with it. So by adding a couple of drops of water and you're getting those other flavours out, it does last so much longer in your palate. So you actually drink less. Because you've got it. I mean, I'm still tasting that. I've had that little sip. I'm still going through that, enjoying it.
Yeah.
And that's been like 5 minutes. And I don't need to go back to it yet. As soon as I start feel it, that I'll go back and it'll be another 5. So you drink actually less, I think,
Yeah. And when because you mentioned earlier on about getting around, boys around the table, people around the table, having a few bottles, talking about it. With wine, they kind of go, don't start with red and then go to white. And there's almost like a journey that you go on.
Yeah.
Is it similar with whiskey as well, where you perhaps wouldn't start with a heavily peated one and then go to a sherry cask or a portwood? Or is it just, again, do what you want to do?
No, you're completely right. And it's not, a lot of people think, and this used to annoy me a little bit when I went to tastings that other people did. They would just line up the whiskies in the order of age, youngest to oldest, right? And they go, this is what we're tasting. It's about finding a journey. I like to start off with a quite light whiskey and then start gradually get a little bit higher on that kind of taste profile and then come down again, and then maybe move into something else and then go up and then come down again in that journey as we're going through it. Peated and heavily peated being at the end, for a couple of reasons, is because, a lot of people aren't into their peated whiskey. Yet there's the people that come up to me and go, what got you into whiskey? And they'll go, I tried this really massive peated whiskey. And I go, to get into whiskey from peat, heavy peat is, I've always found, it's going to take me a long time again at peat. And I'm a professional.
I was the same.
I'm a professional.
Yeah.
So we'll leave but also if you're sitting down, and quite often we'll sit down with a few bottles of whiskey, we'll have a bottle of water, we'll have a whiskey glass, and we will sit down and we'll use that glass and we'll rinse it out between. And if you start with like really heavily peated whiskies, then you've got that all the way through your lighter whiskies. So to finish at the end makes a little bit more sense to do it that way, unless it's all peated whiskey you're doing.
Yeah.
But with Glenfiddich and Balvenie, we don't have a lot of peat in our whiskies. We have some peated whiskies. We have a Glenfiddich Fire and Cane. Have you tried that?
No.
Man, that's an awesome little whiskey. That's a peated Glenfiddich, which has been aged in rum casks.
He has been dying for some recommendations from
Is
you.
it really? I've got another one for you, which is great, which is Monkey Shoulder. Have you had Monkey Shoulder?
Yeah.
Which is a triple malt. So that's different, right? It's not a blended whiskey. It's 3 malts. So we make that. So it's 3 malts. Obviously, I've got my,
Skills
pay the bills, which is kind of, I'll probably get done for that because it's not quite true. I don't have many skills. So it's false advertising for me, but not for Monkey Shoulder. So Monkey Shoulder is really nice. It's a great whiskey to go at. It's a great price point. And it's single malt. It's 3 single malts. There's no grain whiskey in there.
So for someone that's getting into whiskey
Yeah.
and is curious, would you recommend starting with a high price point? Would you recommend starting with a blend? where would they start?
I think what they do is rather than buy a bottle of whiskey, just go to a bar like Baxter's. Just ask the guys and tell them what you like. They do this. This is their life, and I'm in there quite a bit. If you ever see me in there, I'll buy you a whiskey. Maybe. And ask the guys about what you like, and they'll help you out, and they'll recommend something because they've got 5,000 bottles of whiskey in there. It's pretty easy to find something you like. So ask a professional, do that, rather than spend the money on a bottle of whiskey that you're not going to like and you're not going to drink, right?
Yeah.
And then go and purchase that whiskey.
Yeah.
If you like it, then say, oh, that's the one for me. It's the exploration first before the purchase.
Yeah.
You might, if you're buying a new car, you might drive a few before you decide what you're going to get, right? What's comfortable for you, what you like, You don't go and buy 10 cars and then go, I bought those other 9. What am I going to do with them?
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, that's how I got onto Balvenie, was doing one of your events.
Oh, yeah, where was that?
You were very generous with your pouring. It was great.
But it was responsible, though, wasn't it?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
I followed you around there.
Was
as well.
Ryan there?
He was, yeah.
Oh, where was this
I think it was at
again?
the Australian British Chamber of Commerce event a few years ago.
Was it? God, yeah, I've done 6 events this week.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't remember.
And because I work with a lot of luxury partners, that takes me to a lot of places. Yeah, I mean, I've done tastings on boats and planes and trains and beaches and standing in Uluru with my kilt on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That would have been...
hit by something. Right in the worst place possible.
Yeah. All right.
Did you wear your kilt as you should wear your kilt?
What you mean? The only thing I had on under my kilt was my socks.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Is that what you're trying to say?
It's actually...
bang on what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But I don't know where your mind's going. I'd say I got bit in the worst possible place. I meant my hand because I had to pour whiskey.
Absolutely.
I don't know where you were going with that. Let's just try and keep this clean. Yeah. I have a reputation to uphold. So I mean, I think, I mean, I think to experience whiskey, I love taking people through whiskey. I mean, last night alone, I must have had about 5 or 6 different people that didn't drink whiskey. Oh, I don't. But they're interested in it because I think when you get to a certain age, you realize this is a journey you could go on, and other people into it, and there must be a reason why. And it's because there's a surprise around the corner. It's always different. It's always going to taste slightly different, and there'll be different whiskies from different areas, and we're talking about smoke as well and everything else. So it's a really good journey to go on. Wonderful.
I've noticed that whiskey's starting to get very, very, very popular. As you just said, people are trying to start it, later on in their journey. They want to, start getting into whiskey because everyone else likes it. Why is it starting to become so popular currently?
Well, it's not really starting. It's been popular since
maybe
it was
it's just
discovered.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's here. I mean, it was the Irish who discovered whiskey. Around about the 6th century, the Irish monks went to Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq, Iran.
Yeah.
And they found men making perfumes and aftershaves there, and this little thing called a limbic, which is a smaller version of the still we use now, and it would have been earthen. And they're putting the ingredients to make alcohol in there, which is...
Go on.
Sugar, water.
Yeast.
And
Well done. Between you got that. It took a while.
It did take a while, yeah.
People will be
what
thinking,
have
I've lost my internet connection.
We're buffering.
We're buffering there. We're buffering. And they were making, and they were throwing flowers as well. So if you put roses in there, distilled it, you're a rose alcohol, which you could put on to help hide the bad smells of the day. And the Irish monks were like, well, this is great. These aftershave perfumes, we'll take them back to Ireland. No offence to any Irish people listening, but, Irish didn't smell the best in the 6th century either. So taking some aftershave back would be brilliant for them. I think I can imagine this little monk getting off the boat in Dublin, with a bottle of aftershave, saying to someone, here, try this, it'll make you smell better. He's like, I smell better already, you can see that, right? But, and that's a sort of a very, very 30-second of what happened over the following years, because the Irish monks then started to focus on the distillation process, and they realised that it was alcohol, and people who were drinking alcohol were feeling a bit better if they had bad teeth or bad gums or something. Wow, this makes me feel a bit better. If you go to the doctors and you're going to get an injection in your bum or your arm, they'll, let's just slide that one past, right? They'll rub some alcohol in there before they put the needle in because it kills bacteria. So if you're drinking alcohol, it's going to make you feel a lot better, right? So that's where it kind of came from. And then spread around Europe. And then all these other monks and started to do stuff. So we got the Jägermeister monks and the Chartreuse and my favourite Frangelico. Frangelico. It's like, so you can see, anyway. But, they started to pop up. And then when the Irish came to Scotland, when we were Pictish people to bring Catholicism with them to Scotland, they brought with them legality, the written word. They bought Catholicism and they brought whiskey. And the first three didn't really catch on that well, but whiskey, man, we love that stuff, right? So
big time.
we started to run with it. We thought, what can we do with this? And the first thing we did was drop the E so we could save some money on marketing. No. Not paying for the extra vowel.
Is that the real story?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just a transition from the languages from Gaelic to Gaelic, you know. I think was the change there, but then so whiskey kind of stuck. But a lot of people think whiskey was invented in Scotland or discovered. It wasn't. We were just the benefactors of other things, I suppose.
Right. Okay. So whiskey with an E is from Ireland. Whiskey without the E is from Scotland.
Yeah, and whiskies. If you look at America, for instance, I think there's a lot of famous whiskies that don't have an E, but it's both ways. And a lot of that was depending where the founding fathers of those distilleries in America came from, whether it was Scottish or Irish. You just spell it the way you spell it, right? I'm very passionate about it. I hate anybody spelling whiskey with an E. If it's on marking, I'll get it changed because to me, whiskey with an E is Irish or American whiskey. It's not Scotch whiskey. So for someone spelling it wrong, if they're putting it in writing or something, it's almost like spelling my name wrong.
Yeah. I heard something that if the name of the country has an E in it, whiskey has an E in it.
I heard that the other day there too for the first time ever.
Yeah,
I've been doing my head in now because I keep thinking about it. I'm going, I should do my head in. But it could be right.
So we spoke earlier, you mentioned about Aussie whiskey and the scene over here. What's kind of exciting you about the scene here?
I reckon it's the innovation, mate. I reckon. I got to go on my Australian, mate, for the Australian whiskey segment. Yeah. You know about this, didn't you? Yeah. So, no, I reckon it's innovation, mate. I think it's sensational. I reckon. No. I think Australian whiskey is just exciting and interesting. Is
it because we don't have the heritage?
Oh, well, I think
so the story's different.
But you look at brands, it's all about heritage, and the backstory and about where the brands are from, because that brings consumer confidence, doesn't it? We've been around since 1887, family company, that gives confidence in people. And I think in Australia, though, I just think because people are so passionate about their whiskey, and there's a lot more distilleries here in Australia than there is in Scotland at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, but a lot of them are making gin, obviously, and stuff like that, vodkas and stuff, which are also pretty bloody good too. Then in a few years' time, we'll see a lot of Australian whiskey coming in the market. Good stuff. And hopefully they age it for a bit longer. But then again, as I said in the beginning, a lot of people say, it's not Scotch whiskey, but it's not. It's Australian whiskey. Let's celebrate what that is and let's celebrate the ingenuity. We're so wonderful in Australia. We have such fresh products. We have such a great island for stuff. We really do. So it's only going to get better and better. And we have some amazing coopers here making casks. Yeah. Oh, we've got some of the best wines in the world, the Barossa, the Hunter. So there's so much wood out there to be explored and used to create Australian whiskies that is quite exciting for me.
So in Australian whiskies, the cooperage would be for all of the barrels are from Australia then? They wouldn't use French oak, American oak?
Oh, they'll bring casks in because it's nice to bring casks in. I've got a friend of mine who has a distillery up in Marrickville, and I see him quite regularly. And he's brought a few French Limousin oak casks in. He's got some Quercus robus, which is European oak, and he's got some American oak, Quercus alba. And he's working with those just to see what happens. And it's the exciting, experimental thing. It's not a big sort of distillery somewhere where you don't have access. I'm walking in there with my dogs and we're talking about what's happening with the wood and I'm trying some of the stuff. And it's, that is exciting for me because it's ground level whiskey. It's trying it when it's a year old, when it's 3 years old, and it's 5 years old, and it's being involved in that journey and being part of that journey that's exciting for me, which you don't get really. I can't get that with Scotch whiskey.
Yeah.
So for me, that's exciting because it helps me. You know, it helps me with my flavor profile and what I feel and what I get. And
What does a whiskey taste like at not that you can call it whiskey, but like year one?
Well, it's just kind of so it's at that point. It's just maybe taking a little bit of colour from the cask in 1 year. It's not got a lot. You've still got a lot of high alcohol there.
Yeah.
Right? You got a lot of the stuff that's just going to catch the back of your throat. So, not great.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's why there's a minimum of 3 years on whiskey. Or in Australia, it's a minimum of 2 years because our heat's so different. You know, it's much warmer here. The stuff inside the cask, it's going to evaporate a little bit quicker because it's warmer longer than it is. You know, there's not a... You don't have... Well, it's cold. It's been cold the last few days, right? This is doing wonders for whiskey because, you know, you know what I mean? It's really helping the whiskey here, I would imagine. In Scotland, you know, it's different. It's not like you have that. It's polar opposites. It's not like in Scotland you have that week of summer. You know what I mean? Here it's like a week of winter. Yeah, it's completely opposite. So the whiskey tastes different, but that's why we're a minimum of 3 years. But really, whiskey, I think that whiskey that's round about, for me now, because I'm older, I think as you get older, you start drinking older whiskey. The hardest thing about whiskey is drinking the older stuff and then going back to the younger stuff because there's stuff in the older stuff that you really like and there's stuff in the younger stuff you like, but it's just not as developed as the older stuff. So I think, you know, it's hard to go back. I'm lucky that I have the job that I have, that I can drink really beautiful whiskies with people. Get paid for it.
What did you think? Have you tried what was the one we were talking about earlier? The one that's Sullivan's Cove. Have you?
Yeah,
fortunate enough to try
good friends
that?
of mine. So when I first came here to Australia, one of the first people I ever met was Bill Lark, who is the godfather of Australian whiskey, and he's such a gentleman. He really is such a lovely man. And I've been I'm well connected within the Australian whiskey world. I know the guys and everything. But because I'm a Scotch whiskey ambassador, my focus is on Scotch whiskey. You know, I'm talking about Scotch whiskey. I'm the ambassador for Glenfiddich, so that's my main focus. So I tend not to talk a lot about other whiskies. You know, I'm sure they've got people not as good as me to do that for them. You know what I mean?
That's fair. So where has been the most amazing? So given your tenure in your industry, where's been, I guess, that kind of, Jesus, I'm doing something I love and I'm standing here doing what I love?
Mate, one of the things about whiskey, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, and hopefully today is one of those times, is that whiskey is very indicative of memory. I remember whiskies that are connected to certain points in my life. So it's as much about that moment in my history and the whiskey together that has sentimentality about it for me. Like the whiskey I had when I got married. You know, I remember that. I remember the whiskey I had when I got divorced, which was slightly stronger. And I think that, you know, it's that kind of thing. I remember the whiskey I had with my father, you know, before I went back I bought my dad a bottle of whiskey, right? A 40-year-old bottle of whiskey back in the 80s, right? I got it for him because I wanted to, but my dad never opened it because he just thought it was too good to open, you know, and I wanted him to drink it. And a lot of people do that. They buy a whiskey and they go, I'm going to keep it for this occasion. And that occasion never happens and they end up never drinking it. And the removal guys who are emptying the house out will drink it with Coke on the doorstep, you know, and that sort of thing. And I think just don't look for an occasion. Sometimes the bottle of whiskey is the occasion.
100%.
If someone gives you a really beautiful bottle of whiskey, then open it with your friends and drink it because that's what it's about, you know. Don't wait until you're dead and somebody else is drinking it with Coke Zero, right? I went back to Scotland. My father was very unwell. I went back and I went to the house and the bottle of whiskey's there in the cupboard, never opened. And I thought, right, off to the hospital we go. It's a bottle of whiskey. And we sat and we opened the bottle of whiskey. And my dad said, I'll have a wee one. And he did. And we just had a couple of whiskeys out of it, you know. And as I was leaving, he said to me, he said, now, son, he says, if we don't see each other again, and we didn't, that was the last time we saw each other. He said, every time you come back to Scotland, just take that up and pour a wee bit over my grave for me, you know, because that's lovely whiskey. And I did for many years. I still, well, it started getting less and less. You know what I mean? So to be honest, the last few times I sort of like passed it through my kidneys first.
Yeah.
Just so we could both get the benefit. You know what I mean? I'm sure he wouldn't have minded. I'm sure he would have saw the irony in that, you know? You know?
James, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this morning. Thank you for taking the time. I know you are a busy man. I've been very privileged to be to a few events, and I look forward to many more. I'm going to ask my question. If you got a booking for 4 people at a restaurant, or maybe if you could crack a bottle of your favourite whiskey with 3 other people, who would they be and why?
So this could be anybody.
Could be anybody.
Living or dead?
Correct.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I do a lot of dinners, and I've managed to sit down with a lot of people that, you know, I've wanted to sit down with. I've been quite lucky at that. I've met a lot of famous people. I reckon, if I could have 3 people, wow. That's, Sean Connery. I met Sean Connery. I used to drink in the bar that I worked in Edinburgh. My mother was friends with his mother, and I used to carry her shopping up the road for her when I was a boy. And I met Sean Connery, and I met him. We chatted. He was always a gentleman. His brother Neil used to come in, and we used to chat. But I never ever got the chance to actually sit down and talk to him. I'd love to sit down and talk to him and pick his brains and see what he says. Probably not a lot.
See what he says.
I'm terribly sorry, Miss Moneypenny. Is there something I can do for you? Is that what we're talking about? Well, I do try sometimes. I'd love to chat with him. Robin Williams. I just think him and Sean Connery just wouldn't get on, and I think that'd be fun. You know, I think Robin Williams was just too lively for Sean Connery. Yeah. You know? Keep your pants on. You know, I'd be quite sort of. And then the last one, and this is going to be quite a shock or controversial, I think, would have been the Duke of Edinburgh, who just passed away recently, because he was an absolute unsung, remarkable man who did so much for the environment and so much for conservation and everything. I just think he would just be a really interesting man to talk to, because he lived such a long life and did so many things. I think, you know, I would like that. And I think him and Sean would get on quite well. And I can just get him and Sean off to the side while Robin and I have a good chat about whiskey.
Perfect.
So how do people get a hold of you? What's your Instagram handle?
My Instagram is quite simply James Bunton, or the Whiskey Ambassador is a kind of handle that I've been known by for a long time. You can get me on Instagram, and I put up pictures of the bars that I visit, the cocktails that we do, as we're chatting about before, some of the events that I go to. And and I'm on Facebook as well. And in Facebook, if I'm ever doing a tasting, I kind of sometimes just go, I'm just going to do something. And then I'll book a venue in a couple of weeks' time, and I'll just invite people, send it out there. If anyone wants to come down, we'll just have some whiskeys, hang out and chat. You know, people that I maybe haven't seen for a long time, like you guys, you know, you can come down and we can just chat about whiskey. That's the best way to contact me, really.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
My
I absolutely loved it. Thank you for sharing that amazing bottle of whiskey as well.
Yeah, we're going to finish the rest of it now.
100%, mate. I've got nowhere to be.
And this is also, I must tell you, if you're interested in this, Dan Murphy's have it at the moment, and it's like $400 a bottle.
Right.
Which is well worth it, trust me. I took some clients for dinner night there, and I brought it to give them a taste. We ended up polishing the whole bottle off, and it was just great. You know, felt none the worse for it, because when you're having whiskey and food, it's just one of the best things to have.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Cheers.